Okay guys, I wanted to show you this interesting thing I stumbled on today. A friend of mine and I were checking out a Gibson ga5 reissue, which is the little 5-watt champ style amp that they came out with a few years ago, and it sounded really good. And as we were looking at it, I discovered the schematic in the back of the amp and had a quick look at it, and found some interesting things. I expected it to be a champ clone like the original ga5. Instead, it turns out it's a close relative of the Valve Jr, which is a far more common amp, and there are lots of them out there for people to hot rod. In fact, after looking at the ga5, came up with a few interesting things to do to the Valve Jr. If you compare the two of them, there are essentially only 4 different resistors in the amp to make the different tone, and the ga5 sounds a lot better than the Valve Jr. Essentially, and here's the Valve Jr schematic. Essentially, most of the power section is very similar. We can ignore that. What is different is the plate load resistors, which are 100K on the Valve Jr, are 220K, which sort of doubles the gain on each of the stages. And in the Valve Jr, there's a pair of 1 meg resistors. One loads the signal going into the next tube, and the other one pulls down the signal to ground, making the pot only 500K, throwing away about half the gain. The ga5 does not have this, so you would remove R7 in your Valve Jr. And then the other little thing the ga5 does have is it has a 22 picofarad bypass cap going around the 1 meg resistor that feeds the volume control. And this is similar, although different values, to what Marshall does, feeding their bright channel to give some extra upper mid lift and give you some of that crunch. 22 picofarad over the 1 meg, so 220, 220, 22 picofarad over the 1 meg, and remove the extra 1 meg, and your Valve Jr turns into a better sounding ga5. Fortunately, last week I found a used Valve Jr really cheaply, so guess what we're doing next. So the toughest thing about getting into your Valve Jr is that the glue used to hold on the vinyl ends up being all sticky and tearing things up, which is a pain in the ass. Did I say ass? One little thing you can do is you can take your silicone type lube that you would use for protecting vinyl leather shoes and things like that. You can just spray that on there, so when you put it back together it'll pop back apart later. The screws that bolt the head in are held in here. You want to be real careful to lift these plugs without, again, tearing up the vinyl. Because it's pretty rubbery, terrible, cheapo stuff. But for your roughly $100 investment in this type of head, tuned up properly, you're going to get some pretty huge tone out of the thing. Okay, so here we are, we're inside our Valve Jr, and what we want to do is we want to locate these things we want to play with. Here are those 2 1 meg resistors. Right here are R6 and R7. This is a little different from the schematic I have, but that's all right. Let's see, what else can we look at here? We're looking for the 100K plate load resistors, which there's one of them, I think R4, and R5 is the other. Those go to 220K, and so change those, remove, I think it's R7, and then bypass this with a small value cap to push the treble up a little bit and make it sing a bit better. So that's really all we have to do to get this into the ga5 territory. The power supply is actually a little better built in the Valve Jr, which is one of the reasons why I love the amp. It's a better power supply with more filtering. That's not always a good thing, but in the case of a single-ended amp, that'll work for us. And the heaters are DC, so there's a lot of noise reduction built right into the amp, making it a real effective small amp. The other thing that's great about it is it comes with 4, 8, and 16 ohm output transformer taps, so you can use this as a head with a larger cabinet and do all sorts of things with it. Some of you may want to change the output transformer. My other one, I've changed the output transformer to a massive Hammond unit, and I may do that one to this one if we're getting to the point where it's starting to sound pretty decent. But again, the idea of this mod is to do the very minimum amount of stuff to get this amp back up and running as something. Change 4 things, make it really cool. So as always, when dealing with your bargain finds, and this was, like I said, a really cheap amp, I found the reason why this was probably sold off and was cheap. Here we have the fuse holder, and this side of the fuse holder is cracked. So what's happened is most likely this amp was intermittent. It didn't act up for me when I was testing it out, but I'm sure the owner was very perplexed as to why he would sometimes have signal, sometimes not have signal, and why things would be doing what they were doing. So we have a cracked fuse holder. We're going to have to figure out what we're going to do to deal with that. We don't want it cutting out on the gig, but you always want to look at the reason why you got a bargain, and there it is. Okay, so we've removed R7, which is a pull down to ground. We've removed R4, we're going to replace it with 220. We've removed R3, we're going to replace it with 220. And we're then going to bypass this guy with our new brightness cap. And then we're pretty much done, other than we want to review the power supply and make sure the voltages are similar to the ga5. And that's going to be necessary because there are a number of different Valve Jr power supply setups over the years, and the later power supply is different than the earlier one. So, of course, I'd already forgotten that this is the amp with the messed up fuse holder, so that's all fixed. So that's one. That's cool. Okay, so about a week ago I did this Valve Jr. And everyone's out of the house. Not bad for a 4-part change, but it really does need a better output transformer. Okay, so this is my other valve, Junior, with the much larger Hammond output transformer. You can hear it right away.